Remove Purple Heart to testify, in front of a courtroom, in front of a veteran, and no one, not even the judge, foresaw that this moment would become one of the most shocking veteran stories in America that year. The chair scraped, a door opened, light brushed Callahan's face. He did not remove it, and with that silent act, he brought the entire justice system to its knees. This was not a regular trial. This was a slice of history. A story Justice for Veterans is committed to telling, not to move you, but to make sure justice never becomes a privilege. James Callahan lives on the edge of a small town in Montana, a rusting mobile home, an old dog named Duke, a black and white photo he keeps by the window, 3 soldiers in the desert, their faces caked with sweat and red dust. Every morning he makes coffee and reads the US Constitution. No social media posts, no banners demanding respect veterans. He just wears his medal quietly, like a man keeping a promise to the ones who never made it home. They call him the Old Loner, but no one knows. Inside his chest is still a fragment of shrapnel and a nation that never truly said thank you. Jim Callahan steps out of his old pickup truck. Wearing a neatly pressed but worn military uniform, he walks straight into the county courthouse. On his left chest, the Purple Heart. No flash, no glitter. He's not a defendant. He's a witness in a land dispute between a group of homeless veterans and a developer trying to evict them for a shopping complex. Jim came to say a few words, not to fight for himself, but as he passed through security, a guard hesitated. Then a whisper behind him. So where do we start? The outdated uniform? Or that over-the-top medal? Jim turned, said nothing, but his eyes had heard that tone too many times before. Hod, Staff Sergeant James Callahan. Judge Franklin Morrigan's voice rang out, clear but cold. The court requires you to remove the medal before testifying. It violates our neutrality dress code. A beat of silence, only the ticking of a clock. Jim frowned, but he didn't argue. He simply stood tall, placing a hand on his chest. I don't wear this to impress. I wear it because I can't leave Kandahar at the courtroom door. Some people exchanged glances. An elderly woman began to tear up, but the judge remained unmoved. If you refuse, you will be escorted out. No one in that room yet knew that a quiet blow to dignity could awaken an entire nation. Jim Callahan didn't say a word. He simply tugged lightly at the edge of his jacket, stood tall, and locked eyes with Judge Morrigan. No anger, no fear, just a calm that chilled the room. Staff Sergeant Callahan, you are asked to leave the courtroom. 2 court officers approached gentle, but firm, and escorted him out. The Purple Haw still gleamed on his chest like a wound that never healed. The door slammed shut. At that moment, a law student intern, Emily Chen, seated quietly in the back row, tapped record on her phone. She had no idea that her 52-second clip would ignite what the justice system never anticipated, a righteous anger, quiet but capable of unraveling trust. They kicked him out just for wearing a medal? That's a Purple Heart. Do they even know what that means? Emily Chen's 52-second video spread like wildfire, from Reddit to X to veteran forums nationwide. 6 hours later, 1 million views. 10 hours in, hashtag I Stand With Callahan trends across 3 major platforms. A grandfather in Florida cried watching it. A veteran in Texas quietly pulled his uniform from storage after 30 years. A middle school child wrote, "Today I learned honor doesn't wear a dress code." An insult aimed at one man touched the shared memory of an entire generation. And now, the outrage wasn't just online. It moved into the streets, onto television, and marched toward the courthouse. This morning, over 500 veterans assembled outside Fremont County Courthouse. No banners, no slogans, just soldiers in faded uniforms, medals shimmering under the morning sun, standing in formation as if still on patrol. One man stood on a wooden crutch. Another wore dark glasses blinded in Basra. An 82-year-old woman, once a battlefield nurse, pinned her medal onto a worn-out blouse. No one spoke, but no one had to. They weren't there to shout. They were there to remind us, respect cannot be enforced. But when lost, it awakens everything we tried to forget. A black SUV pulled to the curb. The door opened, The first to emerge was a tall, silver-haired man in a perfectly pressed uniform, General William Bill Hanford, former Marine Corps commander. Beside him, a younger man in a wheelchair, Corporal Devin Brooks, both legs lost in Fallujah, Iraq. Both wore the Purple Heart. Hanford didn't speak. He walked straight to the front line and stood beside Callahan, who had quietly returned and now stood among the crowd. Devin Brooks took the mic. His voice was slow but clear. If a medal is not allowed in a courtroom, then perhaps justice no longer lives there. This wasn't just a veteran gathering anymore. It was a living reminder that courage doesn't die in war, it's too often insulted in peace. The courtroom doors opened once more. James Callahan stepped inside, no longer alone. Behind him were General Hanford, Devin Brooks, and hundreds of eyes from the gallery, watching in silence. He still wore the same old uniform, still wore the Purple Heart, and this time, no one asked him to take it off. Jim walked slowly to the witness stand. He turned not to the attorneys or the jury, but directly to the man who had asked him to remove his honor. And then he spoke. I stayed silent once, but today, I will say this: respect is not a privilege. It is a foundation. James Callahan stood tall behind the witness stand. No script, no watch, just his eyes fixed on the room like a man delivering an oath. I'm not asking for special treatment. I don't need people to bow their heads. I only ask for one thing. Don't make me remove what I bled to earn. A soft gulp. A single tear rolled down the cheek of a middle-aged woman in the back row. I used to think war ended when you came home, but I've come to learn the real battlefield is where honor gets wounded and no one dares to speak. Today, I'm not just testifying in a land dispute. I'm testifying for everyone who's been told to stay silent so they don't disturb the order. Respect is not a gift. It's the foundation for calling this a nation. And then, without a signal, the entire courtroom stood. Judge Franklin D. Morgan sat frozen. Before him was no longer just a witness, but a living symbol backed not by noise, but by a stillness as strong as any verdict. He slammed the gavel. Order! This is a court of law, not a stage for emotional display. But this time, the gavel didn't make anyone sit. The clerk didn't take notes. A security officer lowered his head to avoid meeting anyone's gaze. The plaintiff's attorney removed his glasses and quietly wiped his eyes. And that was the loneliest moment of power Morgan had ever felt. No one screamed at him. But the silence was a protest louder than any voice. And for the first time in his career, he wasn't sure if he still represented the law or just its shadow. A courthouse clerk rushed in, carrying a red file folder. Permission to interrupt, Your Honor. There's an emergency directive from the governor's office and the Federal Department of Veterans Affairs. Judge Morgan frowned. The room held its breath. The clerk read a loud voice, slightly trembling but clear as crystal. As of 9:42 a.m. this morning, per Administrative Order 442A, all military medals, including the Purple Heart, are now recognized as nationally protected legal emblems. They may not be ordered removed in any civil or judicial space under any circumstances. A single clap, then another, then a wave of solemn, thunderous applause. Morgan said nothing. He looked down at his desk, hands tightening around the arms of his chair, as if trying to hold on to something that paperwork could no longer justify. Jim didn't smile. He simply nodded. Not for the victory, but because finally his silence had been heard by the law. Huge. In a surprising turn of events, Judge Franklin D. Morgan has filed for indefinite leave of absence. Fremont County Court currently has no official replacement. Media called it a moral domino effect. No disciplinary action, no investigation, just one man stepping away from the bench because he had lost the trust of those he was supposed to serve. Right outside the courthouse, a group of veterans and students built a simple wooden platform. On it, a small brass plaque reads, "The People's Bench." Anyone, veteran, civilian, student, could step up and speak. No one was asked to remove anything. No one was told to be silent. And on its very first day, the speaker was none other than James Callahan. James Callahan stepped up to the People's Bench. He rested a slightly trembling hand on the wood, then looked out toward the seats, where a high school student, a former battlefield nurse, and a group of young Marines just discharged sat watching. He didn't read a speech. He simply said one sentence. "This isn't a medal, it's a promise. If I can carry these wounds, then this country can carry the memory of them." A long silence, then a few scattered claps, not loud, but honest. He stepped down. No one called, "Court dismissed," because in that moment, nothing ended. Something began. A new way to remember, not through textbooks or monuments, but by choosing to live with heart. A week later, in the rusted mailbox outside his trailer in Montana, James Callahan received an envelope with no return address. Inside, a handwritten letter. "I was once a federal judge. I sat on the high bench, but my heart always bowed to procedure. You stood on the ground and lifted a nation with your silent defiance. Thank you for speaking on behalf of those of us who'd grown used to looking down." Callahan folded the letter, tucked it into the Constitution he still read every morning. No one knows who wrote it, but they know what he did was justice, not reaction. And if you're watching this video, you're not just revisiting a story, you're inheriting a responsibility. Share this if you believe. Justice doesn't begin in court. It begins with how we treat each other in the everyday. This is justice for veterans. We don't tell stories to move you. We tell them so no one is forgotten.